All right, so
I was like, wait, that's kind of true.
with that, whenever y'all are ready to start, go and get going.
Okay. What do you think the author, or why do you think the author talked about like rain so much? Like, what was so important about the rain?
Well,
The rainy season.
I felt like it was to set a setting and a tone of the entire chapter, because when you think of rain, you think of, I don't know, like depressing. And even though it's not like a super depressing chapter, it's like to set the tone of like their setting around them. Like the Japanese Christians are constantly in like rain, if you really like want to think about it.
I get what you're saying. Like whenever it rains, it's kind of depressing and it kind of sets a mood for being like a sad, depressing like area in the book. And I guess since like they haven't really been super comfortable in Japan yet, like where they are, and especially being Christian like ministers there, they're not super comfortable. So I guess the rain is kind of just bringing them down a lot more.
And when you think more literal in the book, when rain was mentioned, he says, due to the rain, it is easier to like, I don't know, be around more of the Japanese Christians because the vigilance of the officials, the Japanese officials, is lesser.
I found a quote in chapter 38. Just kidding. I don't know what chapter it is, but it's page 38 in paragraph 1. And it said, "But Christ did not die for the good and beautiful. It is easy to die for the good and beautiful. The hard thing is to die for the miserable and correct. This is the realization that came home to me acutely at that time." What do you guys like think? Like, that's a pretty like deep quote. Like, what do you get from that?
Well, I actually had that quote written down too. But like during that part in the book, he's talking about how he baptized a young child and he would grow up to be like his parents, but like that's kind of where the quote came from. But like I guess the deeper meaning of it is that like Christ didn't just die for because he was told to, he wanted to do it. And like,
yeah, I just feel like, along with what you're saying, that like it's like easier to die for like, if you're dying for something like you loved and believed in and like you knew was good and right, like that would be a lot easier for dying for something you know is like corrupt and like bad and not worthy of like you dying. So like him dying, like even though like what he was dying for was not worth it at all, like we weren't worth it and we're so corrupt and like not as good as him, it's just like kind of powerful.
And I guess if you relate this to the missionaries, it's easy to go where you are and preach to those around you, but it's hard to go out of your comfort zone and go to others where it's harder to communicate what they're trying to do.
I think it just makes his death a lot more powerful. The fact that he did it, like, because, like, yeah, they were bad people, and it's not like he loved, well, he did love them, but it's not like he, like, knew that they were good and stuff.
So then, why do you think the real reason, or what do you think the real reason that the people in Japan, like the Christians, wanted to hide their faith, other than like just the law said they couldn't?
I think they were probably just scared, because at that point one of their main leaders is like gone, and so they're like, if he hid their faith, like if he hid his faith, like I think it's like they probably think it's like justified when they hide their faith, and like they're probably scared also because of like if the person they look up to so much did it, like we should too.
I feel like that's the only thing like they know how to do.
Yeah.
Do you think they were like being Christians only because their mentor or whoever was a Christian, or because they actually wanted to follow Jesus and do what was right?
I think they wanted to follow Jesus and pursue him, but I think they were brought up in a way where like doing that like had a huge cost, and so like when they probably learned about it in like Japan, they were probably not like taught to like go like scream it out in front of everyone like, oh, I love Jesus, I love Christ, because like that's how you get yourself killed, and that's probably how they were taught.
So then why nowadays, like in current society, when like we as Christians, we generally don't go around shouting our faith around, like, and we're not, our lives aren't threatened. Why do you think, like, they can't, we won't?
I think we're just like comfortable here, and like people's opinions and like judgment and stuff. So we have like really like lame excuses not to, but they have actually serious ones.
Yeah,
I think-
like like what Lizzie was saying, I feel like if I was just like running around the streets, I would feel like humiliated, like, because I feel like other people would be judging me.
It's more of like, well, for me, like, I feel like for everyone, it's like what society says, like, about Christians, that, like, if you did proclaim your faith to other people that weren't accepting of it, that they would think differently of you or look down on you.
I think like the whole reason like why most people don't, or like, or why I don't usually, is like it's like how people perceive you is like a really big like factor of like how you like are and how you live your life sometimes, and like how confident you are, and like how much like, I don't know how else to say it. Let's say it, but it's like judgment, just like regular judgment, and like a lot of people, no one likes to get judged, and usually like especially like right now with everyone being like politically correct and like all that stuff going around, it's like,
Yeah.
I feel like we're just like less grateful than they are.
yeah.
And if we just like saw through like all the judgment, it would be like way better.
So along with like them growing up in like a place where like it's not safe to share the word, there's a quote on page 37, and it says, "A single word might as well betray us. So from fear we said nothing." So like that's probably like they like want to say something, but like they're just like probably paralyzed with fear because they know like it's life or death, like, and they don't know who is like dangerous to talk to. Like anyone could tell anyone about what you tell them.
I kind of have a quote that relates to what we're talking about too. They cannot this is on page 33. They cannot register on their faces any sorrow, nor even joy. The long years of secrecy have made the faces of these Christians like masks. This is indeed bitter and sad. Why has God given out Christians such a burden? This is something I fail to understand. Like, I guess right now he's like kind of like mad at God right now. Like, why have you made these people in Japan so afraid to be Christians and so afraid to like spread the word and proclaim themselves?
Yeah, and talking about like our subject, a quote on page 33 again says, "Consequently, the Christians have almost no trust in the people of other villages." And in the same paragraph, it talks about how you're rewarded if you tell others about, or tell the officials who's a Christian, so they also like can't go around proclaiming it or trying to convert others, because those people, they probably only really care about money if they're just being told about this new religion. And if the officials also say like tell on them, they're going to, so that's another reason why I think they like have to hide it.
And somewhere on that page it says, every day the officials go around making a thorough inspection of every village, and sometimes they will make a sudden swoop upon a house when no one is expecting. So I feel like even, like, yes, they can't go out and, like, have their own faith and, like, tell other people about their own faith, but I also feel like they can't even have, like, a private faith of their own because, like, their houses are being, like, invaded and, like, inspected and stuff. So, like,
Yeah. I feel like their first response to like, if they ever like get asked like, "Are you Christian?" like from other people or like officials or anything, like their first response is always to like deny it, because like that's just like a safe bet. Like that's how they're gonna like be okay, be safe. And so I think like that's just their like go-to. That's like their like safe place. Like they just always deny it. Like, but I'm sure like they don't want to, but that's just the easiest thing to do in that situation.
I feel like if that was me, I would struggle with that a lot. And I feel like my faith wouldn't like be strong at all. I feel like over the years I would just like not be a good Christian and it'd just like go away. And I feel like it'd be really hard.
Yeah, because it's so hard to like practice the word and like have community with people if you can't like openly do that.
I have a question. Like, so there's 3 missionaries, right?
There were 3 originally, only 2 ended up.
Okay. Like, this quote is on page 35. It says, "Since coming to Japan, he has always been in good spirits. Perhaps he feels that with the good nature and humor he can give courage to us both. To tell you the truth, my own feeling is that we will not be captured. Man is a strange being. He always has a feeling somewhere in his heart that whatever the danger, he will pull through." If y'all were in like that same situation and y'all had someone that was like always happy, like always there to lift you up, would y'all mostly depend on them for courage, or would y'all depend on like yourselves or God for courage?
I would probably go to the friend because even though like you're like following God and stuff, like it's hard to like depend on him in like a place where like you can barely even talk about him. So I would probably like just like lean into that friend and hope they pour into me.
Yeah, I would agree with that because it's hard to like depend on yourself in that situation because you don't have anyone to talk to and like bounce ideas off of. So I'd probably go to my friend.
I feel like my first thought would be to go to my friend, but then after a while I'd realize like they're not giving me the kind of like hope that I need. So
Yeah.
then I would eventually like turn to God and be like, I don't know what else to do. Like eventually I think it would get to that point. But
I think I would depend on myself because I'm like, I would probably be more realistic in it. Like, you can't say like we won't get captured or however he was acting. You have to like be realistic and serious at sometimes to really get a grasp of like what's happening. You can't just always be super positive about things. You have to get a feel and get real for a second.
I agree with Trixton. I think like if you're always positive and always just trying to be uplifting, it gets to a point that it gets really annoying. Or at least that's for me. Like if you're always positive in like everything, it can get really annoying. So if do you think like people or Christians in other countries are like better or worse compared to like Christians in the United States, or like even yourself?
And like what standard?
Like-
just better overall, or like
More faithful, like has the better faith.
I can see people in like low corruption, is that the word?
Yeah.
Like low corrupt areas and like not really having someone that like we do to depend on. Like I know we all have like family members and like friends to depend on. Like some people in that people in that areas like may not have a few like really close people to lean on because of they're Christian, and people might like steer away from that, but I feel like they would have more faith in God than we do here.
I feel like that in less corrupt countries, like you were saying, it's easier to evangelize, and like there's so many more opportunities to reach out and like do something about like being a good Christian. But I think that people in countries where like they need to have faith and like that's like mostly what they rely on because their situations are like awful, I feel like they have more like solid faith than people in less corrupt situations.
Yeah, I feel like in our yes, people out of like the United States who are Christians have a better faith because we depend more on materialistic things than God, and they, due to them not having a material, depend on like God, their faith, because like we rely on like, all right, how am I gonna make it through? I don't have this much of whatever, and they depend on like, I don't have this at all, so let me just put my faith in God.
I think that like people in oppressed like areas like Japan was in this book. I think they have like a stronger, the ones who keep their faith have a stronger faith than we do in like our privileged country. But that's also like I disagree with what Ansley said about not having a personal, like someone you can rely on. I personally think in an area where like they can't trust like their next door neighbor to, you know, openly talk about their faith. I think like they have a closer relationship with their family than like we would or we do.
I think it's like they have really good faith down there, but like it's harder to like build onto that faith and like learn new things like with other people and like experience new things because it's just like not really available to them.
On page 30, there's a quote that says, "Never have I felt so deeply how meaningful is the life of a priest." And this he's relating like how much like the Japanese Christians need him. But like, what do you guys think about this quote? Because like, I don't know, like if it seems somewhat more like prideful to me, just my interpretation, because he's saying like how